I'm a big horror fan, as well as a big Sam Raimi fan, so I finally decided to sit down and watch his demonic Cabin in the Woods nightmare franchise in its entirety, and it was nice to see how much it has evolved throughout the years. Going from a low-budget sleeper hit to funny slapstick comedy to a straight-up horror sitcom about a man and his chainsaw hand, and somehow never losing the essence that makes the franchise so great. Or has it? So let's dig up this rotten family tree, grab our chainsaws, and see where each entry in this series ends up landing. I have to hand it to Raimi for this first entry. This movie was made purely on willpower and creativity. They pretty much strapped the camera to anything that could move. The shaky cam demon POV just gliding through the trees. It's so iconic that it has been ripped off 1,000 times since then. And I think it might be because of the low budget they had. But I don't think any other tracking shot POV comes close to nailing the uneasiness and dread those shots were able to pull off. It's kind of like found footage adjacent before found footage was even a genre itself. And some scenes, specifically one that involves a tree, still make my skin crawl. Let's talk about our main protagonist a bit, Mr. Ash Williams. In this one, you can see the building blocks of what will make the character a true franchise hero. But for the majority of the time here, he's just a normal dude getting absolutely wrecked by forces beyond his comprehension. And that type of vulnerability gives this movie its unique feel. He's not cracking jokes while everyone around him is turning into deadites. He's terrified, screaming, crying, and looking genuinely broken, which makes the experience even more scary. The rest of the cast basically exists to either get possessed or mutilated in increasingly disturbing ways. And with pretty good practical effects, you definitely remember some of them. For me, the movie stumbles a bit in the pacing. There is a stretch in the middle of the film where people are just wandering around the cabin, reacting to every noise they hear. And it does drag on for longer than it needs to compared to everything else. But let's finally address the tree scene, which I'm going to reiterate here again and say, yeah, it's exactly as messed up as you remember, and it earns every bit of the discomfort it causes. All in all, this one is one of the purest forms of cabin in the woods horror ever put to film. And it kind of holds up despite being dated at this point in time. And Evil Dead 1981 gets a solid.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
This is kind of one of those sequels that shouldn't really work on paper. I mean, it's basically a let's redo the entire plot of the first movie, but take away the seriousness and make it a slapstick comedy sort of deal. Sounds like something that wouldn't work, especially since I loved the tone of the first one. But this kind of works extremely well. The movie is not just good, it's become one of the most influential and beloved horror comedies ever made. It does such a great job blending horror and comedy together that you honestly just love every second of watching. And that's insanely hard to get the balance just right for the entirety of a 90-minute movie. But Raimi once again pulls it off. The evolution of Ash's character from the first movie to how he ends up by the end of this one is shockingly good character writing. He starts the movie like he was throughout the majority of the first one, shocked, terrified, and pathetic. But when we get to the midpoint, his hand gets possessed and starts attacking him. It's gotta be one of the all-time greatest physical comedy bits in horror. Watching Bruce Campbell literally fighting himself across the entire kitchen, dishes flying, his hand strangling him, slamming it into a door, and finally sawing it off was Buster Keaton and Three Stooges level of comedy gold. It's the moment he stops being a victim and starts becoming the smartass, chainsaw-wielding icon everyone remembers. I think the Deadites are definitely better in this one. In the first one, they're basically, for the most part, just a growling, feral threat. In here, they got that quick-witted personality I'm used to. They keep taunting Ash, rage-baiting him about how scared he is. Henrietta in the basement basically becomes a master rage baiter, tormenting my guy the entire time. The tonal shift of the Deadites really makes the sequel stand out more to me than the first movie, because they aren't scary anymore because they're silent and an unknown entity. They're even scarier now because they are gleefully enjoying your pain and suffering, and that just gives them a more unsettling flavor of dread. Annie and all the rest of the newly introduced cast once again just exist to keep the plot moving and to give Ash some people to protect. None of them really bring much to the movie, but that's kind of the point of this one. It's basically a one-man show, and Bruce Campbell definitely delivers in that aspect. I'd say my only real gripe here is that I've never really liked the flung back in time ending, but it is a funny ending cliffhanger. It's just not a satisfying ending. But honestly, by that point, the movie just got so many things perfect that I didn't really care. I would accept any ridiculous ending they came up with. I think this is peak horror comedy, and it deserves...
It was perfect.
Naturam de Monto, the
book of the dead.
At this point in the franchise, they fully abandoned the horror elements and turned it into a full-blown medieval action comedy. And it kind of works, but also not really at the same time. I flip-flop between liking and not liking this movie all the time. We continue from where the second one left off, with Ash being sent back into the past, where he's taking on deadite skeleton armies with his groovy one-liners and a boomstick. It's genuinely a fun time when the movie leans heavily into the ridiculousness and campiness of the premise. The movie has a lot of good things going for it. The deadite army assault, the good Ash versus evil Ash mirror gag, and basically anything involving the Pit Witch is kind of fun to watch. Where the movie does kind of lose me though, is that Ash's quick shift from underdog forced into being a hero to confident badass action hero cracking jokes, which, as I said, is pretty good character writing. It does kind of take away from the desperation that made him such a relatable and compelling character in the first two movies. He's no longer screaming and terrified of what's happening around him, so the stakes feel a little bit lighter than before. I do think the stop-motion skeleton army effects still hold up in some scenes, and it's still a genuinely amazing achievement for the era. But I will also say some of the other effects definitely have not aged too well. All the supporting cast of medieval villagers, just like in the other movies, are mostly forgettable. At this point, we know we are just here to see Ash wreck some deadites, and the rest is all comic relief. I think it's a fun movie. It's something I'd probably put on in the background when I'm doing something around the house. It works for the most part, but never quite grabs my attention like the first two. The tonal shift is a bit disconnecting. So I'll give Army of Darkness a...
Naturum de Monto.
When you have to remake a beloved cult classic without its most iconic character, Ash, that will always be a tough sell to the franchise's core audience. And this movie's answer to that was basically, let's forget the charm, let's forget the humor, and let's just make the goriest and most physically punishing version of an Evil Dead movie. It's a pretty bold approach, and I have to respect that it didn't just copy and paste Raimi's style. But ultimately, this ends up being my least favorite entry in the franchise. I was expecting a bit better. Mia's entire arc, going from addiction into possession, gives the film a decent emotional layer. And I think it's pretty clever to introduce that element, because her friends mistake her demonic symptoms for withdrawal symptoms, which is something fresh, because the trilogy movies never did anything that heavy. Jane Levy puts in a pretty good physical performance. She is very committed in the scenes where the movie shows her suffering, which did keep me engaged for the most part. The rest of the cabin crew, however, I think you guys get it at this point. They were forgettable. No real personalities either, which, in a franchise that ignores the rest of the cast anyway, still feels like a step down from the previous three's side cast. I will say the practical effects in this one are definitely a standout, and they were pretty smart to take the effects back to the old-fashioned practical work. A few good set pieces here and there, but since it's a remake, they could obviously not leave out the most disturbing part of the first. The damn tree scene is back, and it's even more disturbing than the 1981 sequence. The movie does, however, lack Raimi's creative touches. The playful nature of the horror, the camera angles, and the tension just doesn't feel as dreadful by the third act. But it's still better than a lot of modern horror movies. It is a competent, well-crafted horror movie.
Mm-hmm. Now that's what I'm talking about.
Holy hand. Kelly, you see this? I got a hand. It's real.
Ash vs. Evil Dead gives us 3 full seasons, with Bruce Campbell back playing Ash Williams, which was a good way to get OG fans and newer fans back into the franchise. The tone the series goes for is definitely more based on Evil Dead 2, which I liked very much, but it gets stretched and amplified across dozens of episodes, and I think the series is a welcome addition to the franchise. The gore is there, the humor remains unapologetically dumb, and Ash gets to be how he's always been in the earlier versions: pathetic, cowardly, and a self-obsessed dumbass who always seems to still rise to the occasion every single time and be the hero. I think Pablo and Kelly are definitely real standouts in this show, and they deserve a lot of credit here for being more than just side characters. Pablo goes from a wide-eyed, true believer who's always being dragged into Ash's nonsense to slowly becoming a real demon hunter and gets his own little arc with the Necronomicon. Kelly goes from a helpless bystander to a hardened fighter, giving the show that emotional backbone. Ruby is also a fine addition, playing the role of an antagonist throughout the series. And because it is an episodic show, they get to flesh out and explore the mythology of the universe way more than they could in any movie. I think what the show does best is that it genuinely doesn't hold back from portraying Ash as not nearly that great a person. He's a deadbeat, he lies constantly, and he's still that same coward, and the show never lets him off the hook for that. The moments where he goes from loser to reluctant hero work best, because I've always found the character relatable in those moments. Now, is every episode a full-on masterpiece? Definitely not. There are stretches mid-seasons where it feels like the story is just dragging on aimlessly, especially when they're exploring side mythology, but the highs are definitely worth going through those boring bits. Pretty good job with this one.
Mommy's with the maggots now.
I think from what I've seen from a lot of OG and reboot fans, I might have a hot take on this one. Moving the franchise out of the woods and into an apartment building was genuinely the smartest thing they could have done to give the franchise a new, fresh feel. Instead of the isolation now being a source of dread, it's now the confined space that becomes scary. It does give this movie its own unique feel, and turning a loving mother into a deadite attacking her own family is a much darker tone than the franchise did before. The one thing it definitely borrows from the first movie is that strong sibling bond between Beth and Ellie, like with Ash and Cheryl. There's real history and tension between them before anything supernatural even happens, so the scenes later on and what's being said between them carry more weight. The kids are also surprisingly well used in this. The film isn't scared to put them in danger and doesn't hold back on the grossness either. The set pieces are pretty creative, and there are quite a few that stand out, like one scene that involves a cheese grater. Also, the elevator possession scene was pretty gory. It does lose me a bit with some of the CGI they used in the third act, but honestly, that's just a nitpick. All in all, this was pretty good. I liked it a lot.
Because I love it in here. I fucking love it!
To your perfect family. Cheers.
At this point, the most impressive thing about this franchise is that it still finds ways to make the same basic premise feel fresh and new. Evil Dead Burn gives you the same familiar setting, a remote location, the Book of the Dead, and a group of people trapped together fighting for their lives against the Deadites. But what sets this and all the other Evil Dead sequels apart from your usual standard horror sequel is that it never feels like it's just going through the motions. I think director Sebastian Vanacek understands exactly what makes this franchise work, but even more importantly, he understands how to take it someplace new without losing the essence of Evil Dead. What immediately stands out is that this is definitely the most brutal and most violent version we've ever gotten. Like I've said in the other reviews, there is always one scene that genuinely makes me uncomfortable. This one basically made all that seem like a kid's movie. The pacing is very efficient for a 2-hour movie, and once the Deadites show up, it becomes an unending barrage of brutality, tension, and increasingly uncomfortable set pieces. And I'd say the set pieces are one of this movie's strongest points. I think every Evil Dead lives or dies by how creative they can go with the gore elements, and Burn delivers some of the most memorable to date. Some of the kills and scares were genuinely inventive, and most of the time, I was just wondering what they were going to come up with next. I know from the trailers that some people were worried the movie would be CGI heavy. I just want to tell you not to worry, because there is CGI here and there, but the effects are practical for the most part. The performances are another standout here. Lucienne Buchanan carries much of the emotional weight of the film, and she does give a good, believable performance. Also, the actors playing the Deadites understood the assignment, because they might be my favorite representation of them in the franchise. The movie also dives heavily into the lore of the Necronomicon, more than I think we've ever gotten in any movie before. We all know how it works. You find the book, you read from it, and bad things happen. This one talks a bit about the origins of the book, while introducing new lore as well. That said, the film is not perfect. It tries to explore the themes of trauma and grief, and by the end, some of those ideas do feel underdeveloped. The movie does have an emotional core, but it does feel like it's more interested in moving to the next crazy scene, instead of fully unpacking the character drama. Still, those feel like minor issues. Evil Dead Burn is brutal, exhausting, visually striking, and consistently inventive. It's one of the best entries in the franchise, and proves this franchise still has a lot of life left.
Damn! That shit good!
And that's every Evil Dead movie and show ranked. From a low-budget cabin horror, to medieval times, to an apartment massacre, to a crazy family bloodline, the franchise keeps reinventing itself. But now I want to hear from you guys. What's your favorite Evil Dead movie? And if you've seen it, where does Evil Dead Burn land for you? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe.